Hey, buddy. I'm doing well.
Hey,
Yourself?
how are you?
Good, good.
Good, thank you.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah. It
hectic
usually
Monday
is. It
here.
usually is. So we've got a couple people sort of on this live, a few, but we'll get the video out later on. Um, guys, so this is Darcy Doyle. He is a very good friend of mine, and he's with the Mortgage Professionals. So I usually go to Darcy, well, for a number of reasons: snow reports and mortgage questions. So conversations, obviously, mortgage is a big part of every conversation that I have with my clients and that. So I thought I'd just pick your brain a little bit about sort of what's going on in the mortgage world and kind of keep it simple because everybody's situation is different, right? So any advice that or comments that obviously we're making now, I mean, it may apply to you and it may not. So ultimately, it's just super important to speak to professional and get specific advice for your particular needs. So maybe Darcy, what are you generally recommending to people right now as far as a mortgage? Obviously, variable rates are high. They could start coming back down late in the year, we hear, maybe a little bit next year. There's shorter term fixed mortgages. So what are you recommending to people at the minute, generally?
Sorry about
Okay,
that,
maybe a
guys.
little. Oh, yeah, you were. Okay. Yeah, you were frozen.
So,
Yeah, no worries at all. You're
sorry
frozen
about
there.
that.
Did you catch any of what I said? Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, most of it. Yeah. So I guess just at this point, you kind of want to know
Well,
what's
yeah, and
what's going to
kind of
happen
like
moving forward, right?
what you're recommending to people right now. Obviously, I mentioned that everybody's situation is different, right? So, maybe some of this applies
Hmm.
to whoever's listening and whoever sees this video when we're done. But yeah, just generally speaking, what are you
Yeah.
recommending to people, like shorter fixed terms, so on and so forth?
Hmm. Yeah, and it all really depends on the
Right.
person's particular situation, right? So, if somebody is, planning on selling, in the short term or whatever like that, then it doesn't really make sense to lock in. There's always that fixed rate penalty that you have to sort of endure when
Right.
breaking a fixed rate mortgage midterm. So in general, most people that are coming new to me right now, I'm
Okay.
recommending like 1 or 2 year fixed. Most like more, and the more 2 year fixed. Okay, now that sort of gets everybody through this
Okay.
time of uncertainty, right? Now, the Bank of Canada just had its latest announcement on January 25th, and they just, they paused, right? And they said they're going to pause after this moving forward. So that doesn't mean that that we're out of the woodwork here yet, right? So it's all going to be data dependent. So for those people that are sitting in a variable rate now, okay, they're going to assess the situation kind of moving forward, right? But don't bank on the fact that they're not going to increase anymore. That there's a real possibility that there might be another one. And that's all going to be based upon the CPI numbers, the unemployment rate, all those
Right.
things that are going to come out moving forward. I think for the most part, though, I think they get it. There's some pain that's been inflicted here, and there's a lot of people that are going to be getting quite distressed, right? Or feeling that,
Yeah,
feeling
absolutely.
the pains
Right.
of all these rate increases. So my suggestion is 2 year fixed, right? You do pay a little bit of a premium for that, and the banks know that. And this is where it's a little bit of a, they understand the situation, so they know that realistically that people are probably going to want a 1 or 2 year fix, and then it's all about how they acquire funds and all that fun stuff too. But I think there is
Right.
they see an opportunity. So this way you get people through this next little bit of uncertainty, and then they can come out of it in 2025, 2026, when things have calmed down. By then a lot of the
Mhm.
rates will have come down, right? Fixed rates we're already starting to see a really, really big spread between the fixed and the variable rates. And it really, it all depends on
Right.
the discount off of prime. So your prime right now is 6.95%. And if somebody has one of these big discounts of 1% plus, it was really hard for a lot of them to lock in, right? Because there was such a big spread between the time that the Bank of Canada started increasing rates. Like the bond market had already started shooting up, and
Right.
that's what the fixed rates are based on, is the bond market. And if you'll see right now, like the bond market is hovering right around 3%. just over 3% when I just looked about 10 minutes ago, right? So, you know, normally the Bank of Canada or the banks set their rates about 1.2 to 1.5% above the posted rate. So you can see right now, so that's going to get you into the 4.5 range. And a lot of these fixed rates that are 5 years plus are getting into the low fives, early and high fours. We don't really recommend those because we don't feel like they are going to age very well, right? Like, you know, in 1 or 2 years, once the fixed rates start going down, and all these people that kind of panicked, maybe, right? They kind of panicked, and then all of a sudden they're like, darn, you know, I locked in at 5 point whatever for the next 5 years, and they're going to be for sure. And, you know, in 2 years down the road, they're going to start seeing mortgage rates in the 3% range. Guess who they're going to call and say, hey, listen, I want to break that, and I want one of these new low rates. I'm like, okay, that's fine. We can run the numbers, but 20, 30, 50, $70,000 penalties are usually quite inhibitive of that, right? So that's why we're trying to, like, you know, caution to the wind here. Don't get scared. Don't like lock into something long term. Keep it shorter term and keep your options open. So once everything cools down here, then you're sitting in a position where you can, like, you know, you're coming out of it in 24, 25, 26, depending on what you lock into as a free agent to go back out there and get what you need.
So then what would you say now? We had this conversation a little while ago about a client of mine. So what would you say to somebody that's got a variable rate right now, and say they got 2 years left on their term, and they don't want to move, right? They're not looking to, you know, they're not planning on doing anything. So yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, the flexibility of a variable, I mean, obviously historically it's been lower than a fixed term, but it offers flexibility, right? You know, I mean, it's, you know, the 5 years is so depending on where you are in your life and that sort of thing, but sometimes you're making a move shorter than that. So what would you say to somebody, variable rate, 2 years left on the term, should they lock it in? And then obviously at the end of the 2 years, you know, refinance, or what would you say to that?
Well, yeah, and you know what, and that person's actually in, like, the best scenario, because a lot of these people that are in variables right now have just done it within the last year, right? So now, like, they're like the rates have gone up. You know, either they were with somebody that has an adjustable rate that where the payment actually changes with movements in prime, or they're in what they're called a variable rate where your payment stays static, but it's the amount that goes to principal and interest is what changes. So either a lot of those people that are on these variable rate mortgages are, like, up against it right now. They've either had their trigger point email that's come from their lender and saying, hey, you have 3 options. Either, you know, you lock in, you increase your payment because now you're at a point where you're not paying principal anymore, and in fact it's all interest, or C, you put a lump sum down. Not everybody's in that position. So somebody with the 2 years left on their variable rate mortgage, you reach out to the lender, find out what it is that they're offering for that 2 year fix, because I'll guarantee you in most cases they're going to be lower.
Yeah, somebody actually just commented here. It says they're in a variable till 2026. Do I lock in? So now we're talking 3 years, but same.
Yeah. You know, and it all depends on what your discount on prime is, Parm. So if your discount, like, I think it's really a matter of figuring out what that discount is, and then at that point start talking to the lender and finding out what they're offering for the term remaining. 3 years is, I think, 1 year too long, right? Like, I think it's 1 year too long, but what the banks are doing right now is they're making those longer term mortgages more attractive, right? And the calls are going out right now to a lot of them, and they're trying to get all their clients to lock into these 5 year fixed mortgages. And I think that's a real mistake. It's a real mistake. And the banks are looking out for their own interests. And I get that, but, you know, the clients really need to look at what the effects of that will be in 3 or 4 years or more down the road, when the rates have come down substantially. Now they're locked in at a 5% plus mortgage. So I think I don't know how many more increases there will be, and that's going to be difficult for us to really sort of stick our, you know, foot in the ground or draw a line in the sand and say, okay, this is what you should do. But I do feel like the lower term rate mortgages right now are lower than variable by like 50 basis points or more, percent in some cases, or lower. So it really doesn't make any sense to take a variable rate now because you're paying a premium for uncertainty, right? Why not like take the fixed rate mortgage and have certainty moving forward, right? So, you know, at least for the next 2 years, and it gets you through, because like I say, they paused, the Fed and the States, they're going up. Like they just increased by another quarter, and they're talking about more. So the Bank of Canada, I think, they're usually step for step with the Americans, because if we don't raise and the Fed does, then it starts taking a hit on our dollar, and that's inflationary, and they're getting the Bank of Canada is in a bit of a quandary here, right? Because they realize like we're way more rate sensitive here in Canada than we are in the States, because we're way more indebted with our mortgages, and those are things that are most sensitive to this kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So I don't know. I'd say as somebody with a 2-year variable rate mortgage, I'd be talking about locking it in, especially if there's a significant savings, because we're not going to be going down. They've already flatly said we do not expect us to be lowering the term the pivot, right? The pivot on the way back to go start decreasing again, and that's not going to happen. What they're trying to avoid is the same thing that happened back in the 90s. Where they increased rates to stop inflation. They started seeing some positive news, and then they started lowering rates, and all that did is respike again. So it's this double dip, right? And they're trying to avoid, they're trying to like correct their past mistakes. So they've blatantly said that they're going to keep them this level till the end of the year and possibly beyond. But I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing some different rhetoric depending on what happens in Ukraine and what's going on with supply chains and all this stuff about, you know, positive inflation numbers coming back on the line, and then they're going to start talking about, you know, the possibility of decreasing. I wouldn't expect it till end of the year, early 2024.
Okay, so yeah, that's really all. You know, that's really all. That just a couple questions that I had for you. So I mean, as you know, anybody that's listening and whoever watching this video at a later time, there's a lot to consider, right? And everybody's situation might be some similarities, but it's going to be different from one person to the next. So what is the best plan for you is really going to depend on your situation and what you're trying to accomplish and that sort of thing. So I think the key message here is to reach out to Darcy or reach out to a professional. If you don't have one, certainly reach out to Darcy and take the time and have the conversation and put a plan in place, right? Yeah.
It's exactly it, because everybody's situation is different, right? So, you know, long-term plans and what their personal and financial situation is at that time. My days have been filled with this, and I'm happy to talk to anybody about you know, at least my opinion. You know, it doesn't have to turn into a mortgage for me or anything like that. I'm just happy to give you information.
Awesome, Darcy. Well, I won't keep you anymore. Thanks very much, buddy. Appreciate you taking a few minutes to chat with me, buddy.
No problem.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Cheers, brother.
Okay.
Later.
Thanks. Have a good day. Bye.